Hello, all. It's a Friday. We're going to be talking some hockey rumors, some trade possibilities. Not sure how likely they are, but there is some things going on right now that do pique some curiosity about certain players that Eck wrote about in his blog just before we started the webcast at 3 o'clock. I just wanted to mention there was a premiere a couple nights ago in Buffalo, and it's going to be showing on ESPN tomorrow night, I think at 9 or 9:30. The ESPN 30 for 30s, which are always excellent. This one is on the four-time AFC champion Buffalo Bills, called Four Falls of Buffalo. Yes, I know. Hey, it's the only thing we can celebrate is failure 4 times in a row, Russ. But
you got there 4 times in a row. There's something to be said about that.
Yes, there is, and it apparently is very well done and very. I'm sure it's going to be.
I'm sure Scott Norwood was thrilled to talk about it again.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's going to be angst-filled, but apparently there was some humor in it, and there was some good things and some bad things. But it seems like it's a pretty good production. John Dahl, who's a Hollywood director, did the documentary. He's done a few pretty good movies, and a Buffalo-born actor named William Fincher, he's one of those character actors, the actors that you know his face, you just don't know his name. He's been in everything from Batman, The Dark Knight to there's so many movies he's been in. So, but
I saw Andre Reed Hawk in it. He still looked pretty good.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing was I just saw Andre Reed a couple days ago in a Buffalo hotel. The guy looks like he could still play, and based on the way the Bills receivers have been playing lately, I think he should play right now. Anyway,
did they ever return that Thurman Thomas statue? Remember, it went over, it crossed the border into Toronto, and then came back. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Yeah, there was a statue of him that got stolen once.
Oh, I hope they used him, a model of him when he was playing in the 90s, because the model of him, they'd have to have a lot of bronze to make it appear the way he looks like right now. But sorry, Thurman. Anyway, let's get the show started. Peter, you lead the introductions off. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, December 11th, 2015.
I'm Pete Hesse for HockeyBuzz covering the Jets.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Where's the book? And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Russ, Peter, let's talk about Eck's recent blog. He talks about Steven Stamkos, and obviously the rumors picked up this week. What's going to happen with him? Where is this thing going in Tampa? Is he going to stay in Tampa? Is he going to sign an extension? Is he eventually going to go to the Maple Leafs? Who knows? It all started from a like of a post on Twitter that he, has vociferously denied that it was anything but an accident. But he's done this 2 or 3 times. So when something like that happens 2 or 3 times, I get a little suspicious. But the thing is, the trade scenario. Let's start with that, Russ.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a no-move clause.
Right.
The only way that Steve Yzerman can trade him is if Stamkos is amenable to being traded to one particular place. And I don't see that.
I don't know. I mean, look, Marty's saying the way I go back to him, he had one place he could go, and yet Tampa pulled off a hell of a deal. I still think, as limited as this is, if they had to do a deal, you'd be surprised at the value. I still think there'd be plenty of value.
Peter?
I think it can be done. For him to be traded, I mean, he's just got to find the right solution. And if Stamkos is going to be traded, then he already knows he's unlikely to be signing there. He's going to he's open to winning if it's auction because he knows he's going elsewhere anyways. So why not take a shot at winning in the playoffs? It makes sense. I mean, what's going to happen if he's potentially signed? I think things like this work in one or two ways. Stamkos and his camp have a number. They want to hit that number. The Lightning have a number, but and they want to be it. Eventually, they arrive at the number. It's just a matter of what's the term on it, and if they want to do it. And it's going to boil down. Like, that's really all contracts are now. It's hitting that number, and what's the term on it? It can be 7, 8, or less years. That's it. There's not a lot of variables anymore.
Well, the no movement and all that, those are things that get thrown into it. And I imagine if they give him an 8-year deal, let's say, he's going to want some of those things, and they're not going to want to give it to him because they're going to want a way out of it if they need to get a way out of it at some point. And so those are always things that player and agent and team struggle with.
Yeah, I agree, but I think, you know what, the worst contract, to be signed in the last little while of a valuable player is maybe Roberto Luongo, and they still were able to move that. There's always a way to move them.
Well,
Chris Pronger may still bounce around yet, for all we know. Like, you can move these things. I mean, actually, I take that back. Well, Luongo's a valuable player, but even David Clarkson was moved in the right scenario. So, I mean, it can happen. And Stamkos is not likely to end up being like that situation anyways.
Well, would you agree with the comparative that, or the result that if he is traded someplace, he's being traded as a rent-a-player? I can't see him being traded someplace where he's going to sign an extension without Tampa getting a return that I don't think many teams would be willing to pay.
No, I think you mean, so say he gets traded to Montreal, and they want him for the Cup run. Then all of a sudden they re-sign him. All of a sudden there's a future considerations thing. Well, if they re-sign him, you get an extra first-round pick or something like that. Right. I don't think that's going to happen. They're trading him for something in the future that can help them, whatever it's going to be. I don't think it, but there's also salary that has to come with it too. And if you're going to trade him, because he makes what, $7 million a year right now, okay, yeah, it's going to have to be close to the trading deadline anyways, when teams have more salary to trade space to trade for.
Well, a team like Montreal would make a bit of sense in the sense that they are a contender. And I mean, any place that Stamkos would agree to being traded to, I would think would have to be a team that has a reasonable expectation of being a contender for the Stanley Cup. I can't see him agreeing to go someplace, and I'm using them as an example. A place like Buffalo, where Buffalo is not going to make the playoffs. They're a team that's working towards being a good team 2-3 years down the road. It doesn't make any sense for Buffalo to trade future assets to bring in Stamkos unless they're 100% sure they can sign him to an extension. So that doesn't fit. But him going to Pittsburgh or Montreal or Nashville, those types of deals make more sense. Wouldn't you agree, Russ?
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh, though, would have to, offer up Malkin, right? They're not doing that. Yeah. So I don't even know if Pittsburgh has the assets. Montreal, Bergevin is not the kind of guy that rents. Right. If you look at him, even like Petrie, right, the minute they got him, they made sure they signed him. They're not a team that's really comfortable with renting. And so I don't see him giving up much in the future assets department for a rental, even if it's Steve Stamkos, because, again, they sort of believe in their team system. Could they use him? Absolutely. Every team could use him. But there's a limit. There'll be a team, though, if it comes to that. But I still think it will never come to pass. I really think that.
I mean, all the things that have come out in the last couple of weeks, the renewal of this supposed animosity between him and John Cooper. I don't think it's animosity. I think it's Stamkos wants to play center. Cooper thinks he's a better fit on the wing. I think this will contribute to the possibility, increase the probability of him maybe going to free agency, and obviously there'll be a negotiating tactic or a negotiating point to whoever he goes to. If he doesn't re-sign with Tampa, I want to play center. So, Mike Babcock, will you let me play center? You know what I'm saying? It's I think that will be part of things. But
okay, so take the Leafs scenario. Let's not away from that. You just raised a really good point, Mike, about Mike Babcock. Can I play center? Of all the coaches, is Babcock the least likely to hold on to a promise a GM might make about playing a position? I mean, Babcock's going to adjust for that's if that's part of what Stamkos wants in any of his deals, he's missing the bigger point here.
Well,
you can't have one guy come in and dictate that if that's going on.
I don't really think that would go on in the next negotiation. Right. I think it's been talk in Tampa for sure. Mm-hmm. But again, he has been a good soldier. Look, I go back to like Brandon Dubinsky, right? He wanted to play the wing. He was going through contract negotiations. The Rangers paid him a little more than what his market value was because they were making him do something he didn't want to do. They could do the same thing in Tampa. They could.
And I honestly, if he gets to July 1st, it's going to be a full court press on the part of and if the Leafs are interested, which I think they would be, it's going to be a full court press by the Leafs. It'll not only be Shanahan and Lamoriello. I'm sure Babcock will be involved, and it can't be put in the contract per se. But I'll bet you anything, if they're face to face, and the difference between him not going to Toronto and going to Toronto is, a sort of handshake agreement that I will give you every opportunity to play center for the next couple years or whatever. I think that Babcock will do that. Plus, and I'm writing about this in my article today, the Leafs, if they're going to have a realistic chance of signing Stamkos in July, they're going to have to clear the way for Stamkos because more than likely it's going to be a 7-year contract at over $10 million a year. So I think they are going to have to clear out, trade Dion Phaneuf and his $7 million contract, which I think the way he's played this year is more movable than it was at the deadline last year. Maybe move out a guy like Nazem Kadri, not because Nazem Kadri isn't good, but because with Stamkos coming in, playing up the middle, you have Tyler Bozak with 2 more years at around $4 million. You've got Nylander coming in, who's going to be a center. You can't sign Kadri to that extension that he's looking for to make $5.5 million. You're going to have to clear space to bring in Stamkos and still be able to build a team around him. That's the thing. I think the team who eventually signs Stamkos or Tampa Bay is going to have to carve out room to have him be there, and not many teams can do that.
Sure. Look, if it gets to July 1st, that whole crew will be there with a private jet and a box of donuts to pick Steve Stamkos up. But I still don't think it's going to happen.
Okay, we'll see. I mean, I'm not saying it's 50-50. I'm saying if he gets to July 1st, I think the Leafs have. I think Tampa will still be the favorite.
I still think he might be signed before the All-Star game. So I just, I would wait on that one.
According to Bob McKenzie, they haven't even exchanged numbers. They haven't even exchanged parameters. There's been a silence and a shut. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Peter.
What is but is there much to exchange? 7 or 8.
Pretty much no.
You want to be paid more than Ovechkin, Taves, and Kane. There's your starting question. That's easily dealt with. Yes, no, yes, whatever, right? Okay, now you go on from there. So how much more? We feel this. That's easy.
They're going to meet during the All-Star break. There's no question about it.
Sure. And go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I was just going to say, just to give you an example, Ladd's representatives were in Winnipeg last week. We've heard nothing about it, and that's basically apparently the first time they've been face-to-face at all in this, and there's still no news. So, Russ, I think you're bang on. This can happen like that. All you have to do is sit down and just, here's where we're at, face-to-face, see the person in the eyes, understand what they're looking for. It's a half-an-hour conversation, or it goes on for 5 hours because you get into the nuts and bolts of it, and you're trying to work it out right there.
Well,
and
Russ,
the lawyers hash it out for a day or two, and that's it.
At what point, Russ, would you be swayed towards he's going to July 1st, after the deadline?
Yeah, it would be after the deadline. Yep. If it gets to past the deadline point, then I don't think he's staying. And then it just got to the point where they think he's too valuable to let go because of the Stanley Cup possibilities, and then he'll get traded at the draft if it got to that point.
Right.
His rights will get traded.
His rights will get traded, and if a team like Toronto or a team like Nashville or whoever would conceivably be interested, if the price they have to pay is a player to get Stamkos,
it'll probably be a draft pick. To be honest, it may not even be a player.
Right, but knowing Toronto and knowing Nashville, how they were draft picks. Nashville's traded enough over the years; they may not want to trade one. The Leafs have stockpiled a bunch. I don't think they want to trade one. if
it's Stamkos, they'll trade it.
Yeah, they will. I mean, they gave up a third. They were forced to give up a third-round pick for Babcock and Lamoriello. So there you go. Peter, there was a nice little segue there between the Stamkos talk to Winnipeg. You mentioned Ladd, but Eck also wrote about Dustin Byfuglien. Now, we've talked about it before, and we know that there's so far been no progress, at least none reported, about a new contract between Byfuglien and the Jets. Eck is reporting that there's possibly a deadline in January where if there isn't a deal done, then they will start in earnest to try to trade him. Have you heard anything? And where do you think stand right now with Byfuglien and the Jets?
All I've heard, sort of through the rumor mill, so to speak, is that both sides are kind of on lockdown of talking. Like, no one's really heard much. That's the only news that's really come out of this from anyone, other than a report a few weeks ago that they hadn't really engaged in anything yet between the two sides. And that, I think, was Byfuglien's representative was making a comment to, I believe it was Gary Lawless. I'm not sure, but I think it was Gary. Once again, this could pick up pretty fast. I think that if this is accurate, and it makes a lot of sense, and here's why. If it's accurate, Byfuglien probably wants to go to a place that he can choose and then sign. I don't think he wants to be traded and then go out onto the market come July 1st again. I think he wants to go to a place, get a deal done, and move. This isn't in his wheelhouse to be out there floating around. He likes security. He's like Snuffleupagus around town. You never see him, and he doesn't like the hubbubaloo or whatever that comes along with this kind of stuff. He just wants to play hockey. He lets his people handle this, and the last thing I think he wants to do is be traded for something else, and then the noise that makes, and then have to go to free agency again. I think he'd rather be traded to a team, work with Cheveldayoff and say, it's not going to work with us. Find me a place. Here's my 5 places I want to be. Let's go there, because I can work out a deal with these guys probably, and Chevy can probably figure out if they want to work a deal with Byfuglien too.
Now, does he have a no trade?
Sorry?
Does he have a no trade?
Yeah, he can choose every July 1st. He has to designate 5 teams he won't allow himself to be traded to. So there's a healthy amount of options there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I had an exclusive with Byfuglien maybe like 2 or 3 drafts ago. He was working with one of the trading card companies, and I asked him what it was like to sort of change jerseys because he had been traded a bit. And it's funny because the guy who I was doing with, my website partner, was like, afterwards he was surprised I asked him because, here's Byfuglien, he's a 280-pound guy, and he's thinking, wow, why would you ask him that? It might piss him off, And I got the sense at that time that he wasn't a guy that liked that. And he did say it was part of the game, but I did definitely get the sense that that's not something he is comfortable with. So I tend to agree with you that I think wherever he goes, he is going to want to stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
find me a long-term home.
Right.
Yeah, but the question is, I mean, based on what Byfuglien has done the last couple of years, based on where he is in his career, he's going to expect big money on a new deal, obviously.
Right.
What team is willing to sign him for 7 years at $7 million? I mean, that's the ballpark we're talking about here. I mean, we're not talking a $5 million contract. We're talking about $7 million for a defenseman who's what? Isn't he 31? Peter?
He'll be 31 in February.
Yeah, and so not a lot of injury history, but
I mean, Edmonton would certainly be a team, but I don't think Winnipeg would trade with them. So if we're sort of saying that it's probably not going to be in the West, then if you look in the East, it's possible a team like Florida would, to have a pairing with Ekblad and say, wow, you know what? Because Brian Campbell's getting long in the tooth, this would be a great
Dale Talon.
Bingo.
Dale Talon.
Yeah, and Dale Talon.
There you go.
He signed Dave Bowen. That should tell you enough.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and I've said this for a while, and steer me in a different direction, Peter, if I'm wrong. I don't perceive Winnipeg wanting futures
No, they're going to want something coming back.
Yeah.
They're going to want some pieces that are a little bit of now, because right now, what does that say to Blake Wheeler and Brian Little and Jacob Trouba? Like, what does it tell them? It says...
Well, it might make room for Trouba, so the Trouba probably wouldn't care, to be honest, in the sense that it would make room for what his future salary is going to be.
Yeah.
Right,
well, but here's the thing. Look at what the Jets are spending on defense right now. They've got Enstrom at 5.75. Byfuglien actually makes 6, but his cap hits 5.
Right.
They've got Myers, who makes 4 something, and then you've got Trouba, who's in his entry-level deal. You've got Stewart at 2 point something, and then you've got a rotating cast of $1 million guys hovering around. You add Trouba to $5 million and Byfuglien to 7. There's a lot of money on that blue line.
Yeah.
I just don't see it happening. Like, and if it does, someone's got to be moved. Like, I don't think you can carry on with that much salary allotment with this Canadian dollar and a small market team on that blue line. It just doesn't balance itself, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, like, as an example, if Winnipeg were looking to deal with Florida, I mean, Ian Mikosian's going to be a heck of a defenseman. He won't be ready for the NHL this year, but he's getting really close, and he does almost nothing wrong. Like, this is a solid guy who is in the National Team Development Program. Him and another player, like, if you could get, I don't know, Rocco Grimaldi or another decent roster player that you could plug in, I think they would do it because Winnipeg has young defensemen that they could bring up at a moment's notice. So I don't think the loss would be there, but I don't think it would kill them. I don't.
They could bring up Morrissey or somebody like that, but the thing is, when I'm talking present, I'm talking, and if you're talking Florida, I'm talking Huberdeau. I'm talking.
They're not going to trade Huberdeau or Barkov. They're not going to do it. But the thing is, here's the thing about Winnipeg. The vibe that I always have gotten from Cheverdayoff. It's nice that they're contending and making a run at the playoffs each year, but they still are trying to get better for the future. They'll take it if they make it now, but they're not going to try and, like, get everything for today. He will still take a kid that's a year away or 2 years away. He will. Because at the end of the day, they are still trying to get the right team, and I think even he would realize, hey, even if they make the playoffs this year, what kind of run are they really going to make?
Yeah, exactly. It's like Vancouver in the same sense. Do they need to make the playoffs?
Right.
For the long term, no, they don't actually.
No.
Yeah.
And I would just say, too, if you're looking at Florida, and I haven't looked at the roster lately, I mean, if you're looking at kids who Cheveldayoff might like, if they're born in either Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Northern Illinois, or any northern U.S. state, Cheveldayoff has them on his radar, and that's your target right there.
Well, with Mikosian's from Wisconsin, so
there, boom.
And he played in Illinois for the Waterloo Blackhawks, which is a big team for the USHL. So that to me, and then Grimaldi played for North Dakota. Like, Chevy knows these guys.
Yeah.
I think there's possibly something there in the sense that, I mean, they definitely have players they can move. They do. I mean, Florida has more now in their system than they used to. And so I don't think they necessarily have to look at the current roster as much with Florida because Florida is going to look to make an impact in the playoffs. They have to. So I think they would take someone who's close. I do. But again, Grimaldi is pretty much, I think he's back to playing now after the injury. And so that's a guy who I think they could get because he sort of has bounced in and out of the lineup. And right now he's in Portland, so he's probably, recovering still. He's not quite there yet.
But we are talking Byfuglien, and I think I think Byfuglien add to Florida puts them in the playoffs. Almost guarantees them a playoff spot.
Okay. Mikosian was a high draft pick, and that's a defenseman they could keep under their control for a few more years, and then sign him for a long-term deal, and he'll be a cornerstone guy, like a top 4 guy.
I get the feeling that
use that too.
I get the feeling that if Cheveldayoff is willing to take futures and he's talking to Florida, that Lawson Krause's name comes up.
It could. Yeah. It could. I mean, Krause could be a guy that. but I don't think they'll get that much. I think they'll get a good return, but I don't think they'll get an A-plus prospect in that return. I think they'll get like an A prospect and then like a B or a C current guy and maybe even a draft pick. But I don't think they're getting an A-plus guy. I don't even think they would deal Krause for Byfuglien either, because while it might guarantee him the playoffs, it's not guaranteeing they can sign him. And so there is going to be a limit to what the rental price is going to be if it turns into that.
Well, let's look at let's look at other teams in the league. We mentioned before we went live about
before we go teams in the league. One other bitch that I have about the USA hockey team for the World Juniors, Kyle Connor wasn't invited to camp. Kyle Connor's got 16 points in like 10 games in his first year in college, and again Boston whiffed on him, and now Team USA has whiffed on him, and that is sort of inexplicable. I already said my piece about Bracco, but I sort of held back the Connor one, but now I bring up the Connor one. And, the funny thing about these camp rosters, we're only talking about inviting somebody. Yeah. I'm not talking about any of them making the team, because I respect when they say, hey, the guy came in and we didn't like what he looked like. I'm just talking about inviting these guys.
Well, I won't reveal who said this to me about the selection. There's a lot of heads turned in Winnipeg when they didn't take Connor or Roslovic. And
Roslovic is another one. I could see him being a little more of a fringe guy, but he's still been important to that program.
Yeah, and someone I know here who called, a media person here, spoke to someone fairly close to the scout deals with scouting of juniors and stuff, and he said, in reference to the U.S. Team or organization, he said those guys could screw up a one-car parade, like in terms of how their selection, because this isn't the first time there's been some odd omissions.
No. I don't want to say I routinely complain, but I pretty much have to routinely complain because, again, I could go over a long list of guys, guys like Brandon Saad, guys like Christian Dvorak a year ago, guys like they're just, and again, I'm not saying they should all be on the team, but I'm saying invite them to camp.
Exactly.
Make the roster a little bigger.
And this year, besides Bracco and besides Connor, Alex Tuck was another one that was supposed to be, everybody thought would be invited and didn't get invited.
Alex Tuck I really like. But I get if they think they have enough size and they don't want to go too heavy on the size, then maybe Tuck gets pushed out on that. That's fine. I mean, he's got 12 points in 15 games. He's not hurting at Boston College, and he's not a top-line guy. If he were a top-line guy, he'd have a lot more points. I think there's a high ceiling on him. But, I'm looking at Roslovic, and, yeah, he did win a gold medal, as I was talking about with the under-18 team last year. So he was important. He's another point-a-game guy in college. I mean, they have a lot of these guys, and they are familiar with each other, but yet they're not bringing them into camp. And that's my biggest problem. It's the same thing with the Canadian goalie thing. It's like you only invited 2. You made it a narrow 2. Yes. And now you have a question about one of your goalies. If he's going to get suspended, then all of a sudden maybe you should have invited 4,
Well, they invited a third.
I know. Now they invited Montembeault, right? But they didn't at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah. And no one screws up goalies in World Juniors better than Canada does, so.
Yeah, and so we got some breaking Hockey Canada news. Well, first, Vince Dunn, one of the 11 defensemen they chose, he has bowed out because of a pre-existing injury that happened with the Niagara Ice Dogs. So they're down to 10 now, and I think they're going to cut to 7.
Right.
So that's
Chikrin's chances get a little better now.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, who did you say, Russ?
Jacob Chikrin's chances have now improved as the depth is going down, because like I said before, if they were at full strength, I didn't think Chychrun was a guarantee to make the team, but now I think he's closer to a guarantee than he was 2 weeks ago.
And based on some of the pairings that they used yesterday, not that that means anything because they could switch things around in 2 seconds. Like they had Lawson Krause playing with Strome and Marner, which sounds like a line that's going to play all the time. They had Travis Sanheim playing with Dermott. The Leafs draft pick, so that would lead me to believe that Dermott is pretty safe amongst the top 7. Yeah. The other bit of news was that Jared McCann of the Vancouver Canucks, we called this, Russ, will not be going.
Yeah.
As we expected, and
it's amazing that he's too valuable to go to Team Canada, yet so many teams let him slip to Vancouver. I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah. I love that kid going into the draft, and I just couldn't believe it. And now he's playing in the NHL. He's blocking shots. He's doing a lot of things.
He is.
And I get it. I do get it.
And a decision will be made on Jake Virtanen at some point during the week next week. But I would, you know, it would lead.
That one's 50-50 because if they feel like Virtanen's still got a little more work in his game, they may let him go. That one's got a little more play in it than it did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I'll be probably seeing him on Sunday. Utica plays in Toronto against the Marlies, so I'll get a chance to take a look.
I mean, yeah, I hate to say this. I mean, I don't like saying teams should tank and should do things to tank, but it's in Vancouver's interest to let him go for two reasons. One, it affects them getting better right now, but it also affects them getting better in the long run by giving Virtanen a bit of a break from the NHL. He's already been injured. Let him play some juniors, get things going again, get that experience, and then bring him back again. I don't think it hurts them either way by letting him go, and in fact, for the long run, it helps them.
Well, Jim Benning's done sort of a masterful job, though, of working the present and the future. He's one of the few GMs that's been able to get away with it based on these picks like McCann and Virtanen and getting some in the lineup and having some young players still there. But he's also getting a career year out of Ryan Miller, and I don't think they're going to want to waste that.
Well, I mean, they're teetering right on the precipice right now and now they lose Hamhuis probably for weeks because he had facial fractures. So there's another injury that's going to put them more towards, when February 29th comes around, maybe they trade off their UFAs like Verbata and Hamhuis if he comes back. I assume he'll be back by then.
We'll see, but like I said, this is a great year for Ryan Miller, so if they could somehow hang in it and be within 5 points out, they'll probably still make a deal at the deadline to try and make it.
The other thing, you said a great year for Ryan Miller. Have you seen what the Sedins are doing?
Yes. And when is that going to happen again? That's another thing.
That's another thing. Those guys, if there's someone in hockey who can still say bad things about them, they shouldn't even be watching. They shouldn't even be talking about hockey. Those two guys are remarkable.
Well, Peter,
they should have like a trade, like the Sedins for the Shens. Trade family. We've never seen like multiple family members go in trades like that. It would be fun, but obviously you'd have to get a lot more out of Philly for that. But I'm just saying it would be fun to see that. We've never seen that. I don't know if any sport we've ever seen that. The Ferraros used to get dealt together, but never for another pair of brothers.
Yeah.
Peter, you see the Western Canadian teams more than Russ and I do, unless you're somebody who stays up late like I do. So, the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers have played, I think, markedly better over the last few weeks than they have since the beginning of the season. I know with Edmonton, they're getting better goaltending out of Anders Nielsen. They're getting good performances out of Taylor Hall and Draisaitl. They're picking it up with the absence of McDavid. Calgary, it seems like I saw the one game against Boston where they tied up the game with less than 2 seconds left to go and then won it in overtime. They seem to be getting that late magic that they had at some points last year. But, do you think this is sustainable, or do you think that this is just like a blip with either one?
I don't think they're as bad as they were, and in terms of what they were doing, and I don't think they're probably as good as Edmonton going for a 5-game win streak at home, the first time that's happened since '87 or something like that. I think I saw today. I don't think with McDavid back in, it might be a little different, but the Oilers still have a lot of weird holes on defense and doing goofy things. I'm not sure what the thing with Fane was, but obviously there was something there. I don't. Calgary's an interesting one because I don't think they're as bad as they are, and I don't think they're as good as they were last year because they got a lot of luck last year. They I don't know what they.
Hudler has become Yuri Hudler again. He's not the guy he was last year either. Yeah. But Monahan and Gaudreau have really picked it up, and that's really helped them.
Yeah, I haven't watched a lot of Flames, to be honest, but from what I've heard from the people who do cover them, it seems Dougie Hamilton's getting a little more comfortable. I think the Flames would probably like to find a way to use Michael, get a little more out of Michael Frolik, and they should be able to get more out of him because that's a player the Jets immensely. And I think every team could use a player like Michael Frolik. And I'm sort of sad that it's not going the same way it was in Winnipeg for him in Calgary. But if they figure it out a little more, maybe get some good goaltending. They could be. They're a better team than they look, but they're not as good as last year.
Yeah, the Edmonton side has definitely gotten better, but it's funny. Like Anders Nielsen is actually the guy that sort of bailed them out in the short term here, not Cam Talbot. But they're still a fluky team. Like they're getting better offense. Eberle's playing better. Look, Taylor Hall. Like I got asked about that on Sirius today. He's not changed other than he's healthy, right? There were times where he's banged up, but he's always been good. I mean, you look at Taylor Hall's numbers, and he's always produced. He's always had speed. He's always finished. It's just now it looks a little better because some of the other guys are clicking with him. But sometimes it was the point where he was the only guy clicking, right? So I think I'm never surprised when Taylor Hall does well.
No, I think every GM in the league would like to have a Taylor Hall in his team. And when he was the only one out there battling away, it was easy to shut him down because you only had to worry about Taylor Hall.
Right.
And I think Edmonton's got some interesting questions coming up. Leon Draisaitl is looking like he's going to be a stud. And
I don't think there was ever a doubt, was there? It just was a doubt.
I think it's happening now. Like we're watching it unfold in the way that when you thought he was, and maybe a little sooner. And what do you do with Nugent Hopkins?
Oh, that's the question.
That's the thing. I don't think Nugent Hopkins is a $6 million center. I think he's on a good team. He might be a number 2. He's not a number 1. He doesn't have the size. He doesn't. I think he's got the creativity, the offensive creativity, but I don't think he can stand playing 20 minutes against bigger bodies in the Western Conference like Getzlaf. You just can't.
Probably the guy, yeah. He's probably the guy that gets dealt because you still have to have wingers for your top-end centers, and if they were to get an Austin Matthews, then they still would have to have wingers for him too. Yeah. And so maybe you would trade Nugent Hopkins. Maybe he would be the guy. I mean, you certainly can't trade the German Gretzky, right? I mean, you can't do that.
No, but I mean, right now, ideally next year, your 1-2 up the middle is McDavid and Draisaitl. Draisaitl gives you the size. I think eventually he bores out as being more of a two-way player, but he's got a great offensive skill. But his big body, I mean, he could be a Kopitar type, a guy who can play in his own end and be creative at the other end. Whereas McDavid is good.
Yeah. If you've got a 4 of McDavid, Draisaitl, Yakupov, and Eberle, say, even though everyone wants to trade Eberle, I mean, you're in a pretty good position. Like that's not a lot to get, to get upset about, if at all. So it's how you complement that. And I think that's the thing that Edmonton's always struggled with is they just, whatever it is, whatever they do to evaluate, however they look at their game plan, they just seem to get it wrong after they get these good players.
Well, Peter, look at their draft history. They've hit on the first picks. They've basically had nothing from the second round under. Clefbaum was a late first. He was okay. They made what's right now turned out to be a pretty stupid trade with the Islanders for Griffin Reinhart. It ended up being Matthew Barzal and a top pick in the second round, which I think the Islanders ended up trading down with. But Griffin Reinhart's in Northern California in the AHL right now, and this guy was a top 5 pick, but he just doesn't seem to grasp it right now.
I think he'll still be fine. I think it's just taking him a little longer. He's got a bigger body, and sometimes those guys can be a little clunky, and it's taking him longer than I thought. But he's still young. I'm not worried about Reinhart, and Stu McGregor's not there anymore, right? So this year they have a new slate with me, and they should with most everybody. And Connor McDavid did what he was supposed to do, and I actually thought their draft was better than it had been, and as long as they hit outside the first round, they'll be better. They really, like you said, they hadn't been able to hit outside the first round.
Yeah, I'm talking about the last 5 years. I mean, with the new.
But you can't do it because Stu McGregor's gone. Yeah. Like it's a new guy now. So like the last 5 years, it is what it is. But I'm not going to lump in like this year's draft with it, and I have to preface it every time because now they are using a different guy. They admitted their failure with that. So I don't want to pound them too badly. But, this year's draft was pretty good. we'll see. Like I said, they have to hit on some of those other picks. But here's the bigger thing, though, for them. They went out and they signed Cam Talbot. We mentioned him a little earlier. He is not playing against the Rangers tonight. Is that looking like a failure for the Oilers just by him not playing against the Rangers? It doesn't look good.
It's been a failure since, the failure was the determination that Cam Talbot, at 27 years old, after a third of a season when he played well in front of behind one of the best defenses in the NHL, that he was a number one goaltender. It was idiotic to make that decision. He's not a number one goaltender. So I don't know. I never agreed with that trade, and he's a fine backup, but him being a number one was just a really bad decision by Peter Chiarelli. I'm sorry. One thing about Calgary, I think Hudler, even if they get back in the playoff race, which I think is not impossible because the Pacific is really not that great, I think they're going to end up trading Hudler. Hudler's a UFA. Hudler's going to probably want big money based on the year that he had last year, which he's not repeating this year. But if he's asking for anywhere close to what I think he's going to be asking for, Brad Treliving is probably going to trade him, wouldn't you think, Peter?
Peter?
We lost Peter for a second. But I
think they'll trade him. I think Hudler's going to get traded. They have a lot of guys that are really close on Calgary, and so even if they were still sort of contending for the playoffs, they have guys that they could bring up. Mm-hmm. If the college season ends, Jankowski has been ripping it up. Would they give him a look? Emile Poirier is really close. So they have other players.
I think I heard Brad Treliving. I know I heard an interview with him, but Jankowski is one of these guys who might be trying to go, 4-year college guy who doesn't sign and goes free agent.
It's possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure if his future lies with the Flames or not. At least there's some concern that it might not. But let's shift to the East.
I would be trying to tempt him with a playoff game or two and a signed contract, because everybody sort of ripped them for drafting him, but yet now he has developed.
Right.
Jankowski's had a heck of a year, and last year it wasn't that apparent, but it is all clicking for him now. So it's funny that he has the upper hand here. I find that wildly interesting. But the thing is, this is a Canadian club. I understand, Justin Schultz dissing an American club, but Jankowski dissing a Canadian club as a Canadian, that's kind of rough. I don't know where that's going to go. But yeah, Jankowski's got 18 points in 15 games. He's almost matched his last year's total already.
Maybe he sees the depth of the Flames. You've got Bennett, you've got Monahan. Maybe that's the case.
He doesn't want to be a third-line guy.
Right, exactly. And if he can go someplace where he thinks he has an opportunity of being a number 2 or a number 1, I don't know how good he can be, but he may have enough confidence in himself that if he goes someplace else, he could be a number 2 center and get a big contract. But whereas if he's in Calgary playing behind those two guys, he's not going to get many offensive opportunities. Let's shift to the East here. We were talking about Montreal. Montreal's lost 4 games in a row. They lost to Detroit last night. Mike Condon was playing well. They brought up Tokarski as the backup. He took the loss yesterday. The thing I was concerned about Montreal, they got that big lead in the Atlantic, but it's not that big that they can keep playing like this and survive. But they're without Gallagher too, and Gallagher is one of their bigger cogs. He helps them go, not only with his scoring, but he's a pain in the ass to play against. And I think he gets that team motivated. And Peter, I think that Bergevin is going to have to do something sooner than he would like, to maybe help that team along.
Yeah, it seems like he's got to add something in the forwards. And who does he have sitting his defense as well? He's got depth there. It seems I don't understand. I understand why he's been patient. He's got the leeway with the way the Habs have played in their record and the early start they got, so he can be patient, and he is a patient guy. Mm. But it seems that if he gets any more evidence here that something needs to happen, he's got the assets to make a deal. It's only probably because his fellow GMs know he has the assets, so they're trying to eke more out of him, and which is what I would do too.
Russ,
Well, I mean, if it got desperate, I mean, I know Nathan Beaulieu's been in and out of the lineup. Is that a guy they would dangle? I mean, if they dangled him, they certainly could get a really nice forward for him, and so maybe that's something they would consider. It might be easier than getting a goalie, but I was a little concerned with the way Condon played in his last start. Obviously, the team was too. Wasn't thrilled with it, and that sort of made me look and say, I don't know, maybe they will have to think about it. Or, listen, they have Zach Fucale. At some point, they may need to experiment with Zach Fucale. He's a pretty competent kid, and maybe you give him a start or two and see what you can get out of him. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world you can do.
I heard an interesting theory about this, and it all depends on what happens when Ondrej Pavelec comes back, or he will be coming back. But at that point, do the Jets really want to send Connor Hellebuck back down? And if Hellebuck keeps playing decently, Michael Hutchinson's an RFA at the end of the year. I heard an idea, I wish it was mine because it makes some sense, that they might be interested in moving Hutchinson to Montreal with the possibility of getting a left-handed D back. Who would that be? Tenorti.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a fair deal. I think that's possible.
Yeah, Tenorti.
Interesting idea.
So you think this Hellebuck kid's pretty good? I'm just kidding. I've been touting him for like 2 years.
I know. You've been on him for a long time, and you and Shovel Day off.
Yeah, maybe 2-3 years. Well, because a lot of people were on the Comrie bandwagon, and I like Comrie. Yeah. I just liked Hellebuck better. Now, Comrie may still be the long-term guy. You never know. I mean, goalies are weird, but Hellebuck's sort of ready now. But Pavelec and Hutchinson at some point are going to both become available.
Yeah.
They're just going to have to be.
Tenorti has. I don't think he's played a game this year, or if he's played some, it's in single digits. But I know that he just got sent back to St. John's on a conditioning stint for like 14 days, and he's back now. So, they can't really. I mean, it's a similar situation what Toronto is doing with Frank Corrado. It's like he's sitting there and he's wasting away, and I don't think it does a 21
you mean
or
he's atrophying. Are you saying he's atrophying?
No, I'm just saying that you have a young prospect who should be playing, and I understand you want to keep the guy, but like Toronto, it's almost like they're going to keep him until they trade Roman Polak, but they're not going to do that until February. So you can't have a guy sitting around for 3 quarters of the year not playing. With Montreal, I mean Tenorti, he's been in their chain. He was a first-round draft pick. He's a big kid. And I've heard some talk about him going to Buffalo as a possibility. Buffalo's got some forwards that maybe Montreal would be interested in, but that seems plausible. Although, I mean, I don't think it's the Condon and the Tokarski or even the Fucale problem. I think it's the team in front of them. And right now they have 41 points. They're only 4 points ahead of Detroit. So, and Detroit's been one of the hottest teams in the league.
Let me ask you about Detroit, just because you brought it up. Because when we're talking about Stamkos, I thought about this. You think Detroit's a dark horse in Stamkos?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
no.
It's not.
They don't like to spend that kind of money. They really don't.
Yeah.
Well, if it's a rental, I don't. And the thing is, even if it's a rental, they don't want to expend the assets. Like they don't want to trade Anthony Mantha and
I wonder about them. They're always a team that kind of intrigues me and stuff like that. Because remember, they've done some weird rental things and some things when they tried to get Hasek, when they got Hull. They have done that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they trade for Eric Cole or things like that. But, yeah, I mean, Stamkos would be a much higher level than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I don't think they'd be in the market for that. Nothing's impossible, but I don't see it.
It's just an idea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right now, the New York Rangers are 18-8-3. I know Matt Zuccarello has not been playing well of late. There's been some
long list of others.
What's among a list of others? I mean, there's not a lot of room there for maneuvering. But do you think that Jeff Gorton is exploring the possibilities of shaking things up?
Well, there's definitely something that has to happen at some point, unless you're going to let Keith Yandel walk through the season and and try and trade his rights at the end of the year. I don't think you'd get nearly as much as you would get if you traded him at the deadline. At that point, they would have to be sure Brady Shea could play in the league, which I think he's really close, and Kevin Kline's healthy. And I think both those things would happen. So that seems to me to be their wild card. You know, right now Chris Kreider is just beating himself on the ice and not playing the same. Kevin Hayes is slowed down. Maybe he could be used a little differently by the coach. The coach has not had a good couple of weeks with, you know, I mean, everybody could say, hey, it's middle of the season, you know, you got Stepan and Klein out, and don't worry, it's a long season, and the Rangers are a cup contender. You know, that's a nice mantra to say, but Henrik Lundqvist has been carrying them now for, I want to say, 3-4 weeks. And now the warts are starting to show with the injuries. So there is a depth issue, too. You know, Jarrett Stoll's played great. I liked the signing at the time, but was a little curious to see if he still had it. He still has it. He's in the top 10 of face-off guys in the league. Actually, him and Dominic Moore are in the top 10 face-off guys in the league. So we don't really talk about the Rangers losing too many face-offs anymore. They're doing better in that department. So, you know, could Kreider get dangled? Maybe. Could Yandel? Maybe. I mean, I would say if the shakeup's going to happen, it's going to happen from one of those two guys. You know, at this point, I don't think anybody would take Dan Boyle, and besides, you need him for penalty shots, right? So,
right. Peter, the Hamonic rumors have died down a lot. I think people are settling in the fact that, you know, if he gets moved, maybe it's closer to the deadline, maybe it's over the summer. There's no rush, and the Islanders are a team that seem to be a now team. Now meaning, you know, they're going to make the playoffs, or they want to make the playoffs. So you can't trade a guy like Hamonic, who's a, you know, sort of a bread and butter guy. You can't trade him unless you get somebody to fill the spot. And I don't see another team trading a defenseman of equal capability for Hamonic. So I know there was a lot of Winnipeg rumors, and I know like the Islanders, you know, they're going to have to resolve the Opposo situation probably by trade. But I mean, do you think that there's still interest in Winnipeg?
I absolutely think there's interest. There's no question in my mind. It's just not at the price that Garth Snow wants, and I think Garth Snow is in a bit of a he's in a tough spot. The player wants to leave. Garth wants to be accommodating, but he can't. His obligation is you can't sell him for nothing. He's got to get fair return. He knows what he's giving up. He knows the hole that it is, so he's trying to find something to get back. But if the player only wants to go to 4 places, maybe 5, it's pretty hard. So I think this probably goes on and probably happens in the off season once, you know, people can sort of step away, and, you know, if the Islanders fizzle out in the first round or something like that, then Snow's got to have other issues to address too. So at that point, you know what? Then you have a reason to make an overhaul, and maybe the return isn't so big because you're in the off season. You don't have to see results right away and jeopardize your playoff chances, and you're dealing with a bigger picture issue than just one position, and that probably makes more sense.
Yeah, I think the issue's dead until the deadline. I do.
Until the deadline, or not?
Until the deadline, then it'll get revived. I mean, look, the game the other night with the Flyers, there were 15 scouts there for Islanders Flyers. So teams are watching them, but no deal's going to happen anytime soon, I don't think. I've got 2 funny things. Well, one funny thing, Mike, and one interesting thing. I see that Gabriel Landeskog missed practice, but he's traveling with the team. I don't know what's up with him. They're going to slot in Grigorenko, but Grigorenko's doing well. You know, we all talked about him. He's got like 9 assists. He is starting to pick it up lately, has been starting to contribute, so that could be a nice help for them. And then the funniest tweet I've seen today, the Detroit Red Wings alumni said, hey, game day note, John Ogrodnik's on the IR, lower body injury. That's it. I mean, you know, now even the alumni guys are using that.
Last thing, Russ, and I know because you and I watched them a lot, the Flyers are starting to play a lot better.
Yeah, they're playing better. The interesting thing is that Jake Voracek can't hit the side of a barn. Like, in warm-ups, he can't hit the net, and in games now, he can't hit the net. I even talked about that this morning. I want to say it's from October 8th to now he has 1 goal. And his last goal was like November 14th. It's crazy, but the Hackstall system is working to a degree. Gostisbehere and Medvedev back has a lot to do with it because they're getting more push from the blue line. Radko Gudas has played great. And Raffl's got now some chemistry with Braden Shen, and Braden Shen's numbers are starting to climb. So there's that much optimism. You know, Giroux is Giroux. He gets hot, and right now that move yesterday was crazy. All that said, this is like, even with Voracek kicking in, they would still be a bubble team.
Yeah, and you look at and I know it's not even halfway into the season, but if you look at the races right now for the wild card in the East, Boston 33, Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Florida 32,
It's a crapshoot.
Tampa 31, Philadelphia 30.
Yeah, it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, it's now the thing is, if this lasts, if it stays this compacted into February, there are not going to be many teams out there that are going to be trading players. You know, that's I mean, and this is where, like, this has been my theory for a while, Russ. This is where the Maple Leafs and teams like the Maple Leafs, the Sabres, the Carolina Hurricanes are going to make hay, because if there are maybe 5 or 6 teams who are the only ones out there that are willing to trade rentals, they're gonna, first of all, they're gonna trade all of them. Second of all, they're gonna get good prices for them. So I think that's gonna also create a separation between those teams and the teams that are relatively close to them right now, which will lock Carolina and maybe Arizona and Toronto and Colorado into the bottom 5.
Yeah, I still don't think Philly's going to hang in there. Pittsburgh, they're a hot mess, but they will hang in there. Boston, even though they're getting some goals out of Landon Ferraro, Krejci got hurt the other day. I saw him wincing, and you know how Krejci is. If they start missing him, he's their best player. I still don't think Boston's going to hang in there. And Rask has played great. Like, Tuukka Rask is played every bit as good as you'd ever want him to. But they have to move heaven and earth, Boston, to make the playoffs. They really do. And Tampa, at some point, we all expect them to get better.
And Peter, in the West, there's one team that I'm making fun of Eck here for a little bit, but I'm also looking at this team objectively. There's one team that I think could fall off the table completely. It's the San Jose Sharks. And now they get Couture back for 2 games, and he's out indefinitely again with some sort of artery problem in his leg. I just don't see it with that team. They just are completely inconsistent. They're sort of dysfunctional. And I think a team like Calgary, you know, can come back in the Pacific and catch them. I just don't see it with San Jose.
I totally agree. I think San Jose and the Canucks are kind of in the same situation.
Yeah.
They've got an older group of guys who can still play hockey, but there's this big gap in the rest of the roster, right? That just isn't there. And are these two teams that should be trying to actually go in and rebuild or do what they're doing? And somehow, you know, you've got Sedin's having career years at age 35 or whatever it is. Joe Thornton's still great. You know, Marlowe can still play. You know, but yet the future of them, the chances of them doing anything is nowhere, right? They're not going to do anything. And I think the Sharks could fall off. I think the Sharks should fall off, personally. I mean, like I said, I don't like advocating for teams to try and do things like that. I think, I want to see teams compete, but for the long-term health, when they know they're out of it, they've got to do something else and try and get something to start dealing with the gaps in the roster that they don't have in their system.
This is how bad the Pacific is, and this will be the final thing. I mean, right now you got the Kings running away with it in the Pacific with 37 points. Vancouver's got 30. San Jose's got 29. Arizona 27. Anaheim 27. Calgary 26. Edmonton 26. Edmonton is 3 points out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, Edmonton will fall back.
I agree, but I'm just saying.
Even with McDavid back, their goaltending that's been better lately, I don't think will hold up. Anaheim's pushing a big rock up a hill. They have a chance to make it, but it's really going to be hard. San Jose, I don't see it. I just don't see it with San Jose, and Vancouver's tough. I think Vancouver could do it, but if they get a few more injuries, then they probably won't either.
Great show, guys. We'll be back on Monday for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Thank you to Russ Cohen. Thank you to Peter Tessier. I'm Michael Lagello, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.